Rewind the clock just a few years and it seemed as though diesel-powered crossovers were the answer to every motoring need. They were spacious, frugal, they had lots of accessible performance, and because of the low CO2 output of diesel engines, they were generally cheap to tax. Then towards the end of 2015 along came the Volkswagen diesel emission scandal and everything changed. It wasn't just the use of so-called cheap devices in some of VW's engines that harmed diesel's reputation, but also the widespread realisation that diesel engines were producing harmful NOx emissions in far higher quantities than their petrol equivalents. So it was that in time the once favourable tax regime for new diesel cars started to be phased out. And while all this was going on, there were also questions being asked about the suitability of modern diesel engines for only doing lots of short journeys from cold, where the emissions control equipment didn't have a chance to fully do its job. This in turn could lead to potential reliability problems with items such as diesel particulate filters. With petrol engines becoming cleaner and more powerful, plus hybrid and electric cars slowly gaining in popularity, diesel has been on the back foot. Between 2016 and 2018, sales of new diesel cars in the UK fell from almost 1.3 million per year to just 750,000 per year. All of which means this review of the 2019 Nissan Qashqai isn't just about whether you should be choosing one of these crossovers in the first place, but whether you should be choosing it with a diesel engine rather than the new 1.3 litre turbo petrol. To do that, we need to start with the engine. Now, this is the same Renault source 1.5 litre four-cylinder turbo diesel that has helped propel the Qashqai to being a regular fixture in the list of the UK's 10 best-selling new cars. Only this time, Nissan says it has modified more than 90% of the components to ensure that it complies with the latest Euro 6D emission standards for both CO2 and NOx. There's also a 5 horsepower increase in power to give 115 horsepower and a new type of automatic gearbox. In terms of drivability, this should be very much a good thing because it means that the old and somewhat Marmite CVT gearbox, you either loved it or you hated it, has been replaced by this 7-speed dual clutch unit. Now, this improved drivetrain is part of a series of upgrades for the 2019 Qashqai, which also includes a revised infotainment system, which is easier to use, has sharper graphics, and includes Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. Elsewhere, the design and space on offer in the Qashqai hasn't changed for this facelift. That's no bad thing really. This dash still looks modern enough and there's loads of in-car storage spaces up front, while in the back there's just about enough room in the rear seats and in the boot for most families. It's important to remember as well that for all the negative stuff you might have read about diesel in recent years, the fuel does still have some serious merit. For example, take the range you get from a full tank of fuel. I brimmed this last night. It was showing 700 miles then. It's showing 665 now. Now that is far greater than you would get from a petrol car. And if you compare it with even the best electric cars, it's probably more than twice the range you could realistically achieve. Four-cylinder diesels can sound quite rattly, but in the grand scheme of things, this 1.5 is actually not bad at all. In fact, it's only when you really rev it hard that it can be a bit coarse. But of course, being a diesel and having so much of its performance available from low down in the rev range, you don't tend to need to do that. To give you an idea, this car makes its peak 210 pound-foot of torque from just 2,000 RPM, which is plenty for hauling you and your family around at a sensible pace. 0 to 62 miles per hour might take 13 seconds, but in terms of easy driving manners rather than flat-out acceleration, the Qashqai is really good. Driving in this more relaxed fashion also helps to maximise fuel economy. We've been seeing between 60 and 70 miles per gallon from this Qashqai, which given its size is seriously impressive. This new automatic gearbox is much better than the old CVT too. Put your foot down and although it's not quite as sharp as Volkswagen's DSG equivalent, it's still much more responsive than the CVT. And also, when you accelerate hard, you don't get that drone of revs that you do with the CVT. Plus, if you want, you can knock the lever over to the right here and put the car in manual mode. This doesn't, however, turn the Qashqai into an exhilarating drive. It's just not that kind of car. What it is extremely easy to live with. The ride on the 17-inch wheels fitted to this test car is generally very good. The suspension controls the body's movements well, and even 5 years after this second generation Qashqai was launched, it remains one of the quieter cars in its class for road and wind noise. It's just a very competent all-rounder. Should you be buying it with a diesel engine though? That really is the question here, isn't it? And funnily enough, our advice here hasn't particularly changed from what it would have been before the diesel emissions scandal took place, which is that if you do a high annual mileage, then a diesel can still be a really good option. It can maximise your miles per gallon and minimise the amount of time you spend refuelling. If, however, you do a more average annual mileage, or you spend a lot of time in urban environments doing short journeys, then it's likely that a petrol car or perhaps a hybrid or electric model will suit you best. It is, as with so many aspects of choosing a car, a case of horses for courses and weighing up your requirements with any preferences you might have, and then factoring in the costs associated with each fuel type to see which is best. Over at cargurus.co.uk, you will find detailed guides that are designed precisely to help you solve this type of conundrum. Plus, you'll find car reviews, advice, and more used car listings than you can shake a stick at. So why not head over to cargurus.co.uk, and before you go, please do subscribe and remember to turn on those notifications so you can see when our latest new and used car reviews go live.